The morning sunlight filtered through the gaps in the curtain, casting a soft glow over the room, and slowly opened her eyes, adjusting to the brightness. Beside her, Samuel remained soundly asleep. She gazed at his peaceful face for a few moments, remembering how he used to wake her with gentle, affectionate kisses in the early days of their marriage. Now, mornings were quiet, and the routine felt automatic. Silently, she slipped out of bed and made her way to the bathroom. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, noticing the small wrinkles forming around her eyes. A sigh escaped her lips as she pondered how swiftly time had passed. It had been 12 years since she and Samuel had married, full of hopes and dreams for the future. Downstairs in the kitchen, she began preparing breakfast. The familiar sounds of the coffee maker and toaster filled the air. A smile crossed her face as she heard the hurried footsteps of the children coming down the stairs. Mariana, 10, and Luke, 8, burst into the kitchen like a whirlwind. "Good morning, Mom," they chimed in unison, sitting at the table. "Good morning, my loves," Anne replied, pouring milk into their glasses. "Did you sleep well, Mariana? And you, Luke?" The children excitedly shared stories of the dreams they'd had the night before, and listened intently, asking questions and laughing at the whimsical tales they spun. These moments with her children were precious, filling her heart with warmth and light. Samuel entered the kitchen, already dressed for work. "Good morning, family," he said, taking a seat at the table, and placed a cup of coffee in front of him, receiving only a brief, distant thank you in response. A pang of sadness tugged at her heart, remembering when Samuel used to thank her with a kiss full of love. Breakfast continued, the morning unfolding in its usual, predictable pattern. Samuel scrolled through the news on his phone, the children chattered about school, and silently observed it all, feeling somewhat disconnected. After they finished eating, Samuel stood, kissed the children on the forehead, and left for work, barely acknowledging Anne. Once the children were dropped off at school, Anne returned home and began her daily chores. As she vacuumed the living room, her thoughts wandered. She wondered when things had shifted so dramatically. She remembered how Samuel used to look at her with admiration, how he'd pull her into tight embraces after work, how they would spend hours discussing their dreams and hopes. Now, the days felt long and dull, filled with superficial conversations about household duties and the children. Affection had become a rare, fleeting gesture. While folding freshly laundered clothes, Anne found herself staring at a wedding photo on the dresser. Their radiant smiles, their passionate glances, those were the moments that promised a lifetime of happiness together. She sighed, wondering if Samuel regretted their marriage. Did he now see her only as the mother of their children, the housekeeper managing the mundane tasks of daily life? The day passed slowly, with chores and tending to the children. When evening came and everyone gathered for dinner, the atmosphere was thick with silence. Samuel spoke little, offering only short, uninterested replies to Anne's attempts at conversation. The children, sensing the heaviness in the air, were quieter than usual. After dinner, as Anne washed the dishes, she felt tears welling up. Quickly, she wiped them away, not wanting the children to see her sadness. She watched Samuel sitting on the sofa, absorbed in his tablet, and felt an overwhelming distance between them. A distance that felt much wider than the physical space separating them. On Friday night, after putting the children to bed, Anne sat on the porch, gazing at the stars. She remembered how she and Samuel used to do that when they were dating, creating stories about constellations and dreaming about the future. Now, she sat there alone, feeling lost and invisible. Saturday morning dawned bright and sunny, but Anne woke with a heavy feeling in her chest. The children, excited for the weekend, rushed to the backyard after breakfast. Samuel, as was his custom on Saturdays, retreated to the garage to tend to his motorcycle, a hobby he had cherished for years, and stayed in the kitchen, finishing up the last of her cleaning. She gazed out the window, watching her children play joyfully while the faint sound of Samuel's tools reached her ears. Suddenly, a sense of suffocation overcame her, as though the walls of the house were closing in. Without giving it much thought, She grabbed the car keys and drove off, letting her mind wander freely. She didn't have a particular destination in mind and ended up at a lake just outside the city, a place full of memories. It was where she and Samuel had their first date years ago and where he had proposed to her under a sky full of stars. And parked the car and walked to the water's edge. Sitting down on a large rock, she gazed at the calm lake, watching the sun's reflection shimmer on the surface as memories came rushing back. Romantic picnics, spontaneous dives into the cool water on scorching summer days, and endless conversations about their hopes and anxieties. She began to wonder when they had lost that bond. When had the connection that once made them feel so unique and special begun to fade? She sat there for hours, caught between nostalgia and introspection, and thought about her life, her beautiful children, the stability they had built, but she couldn't ignore the growing monotony of daily life. The silence between her and Samuel seemed to grow louder with each passing day, and she feared that their love had been buried under the weight of responsibility. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, and decided it was time to go back. On her way home, she felt a swirl of emotions. Sadness for what they had become, nostalgia for what they once shared, but also a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe, she thought, there was still time to reignite the passion, to rediscover the love that had once brought them so close. When Anne arrived home, she found Samuel in the living room with the children. He looked at her with concern but said nothing, and walked to the kitchen almost mechanically, and as she began preparing dinner, her thoughts were still delayed, reflecting on the memories and insight she had gathered. Tonight's meal was simple. She lacked the energy or enthusiasm to make anything elaborate. She set the table without much excitement and called the family to eat. The children came running, full of energy and chatter as always. Samuel moved more slowly, sitting down at the table with a pensive look on his face. The atmosphere was calm, but Anne could feel the undercurrent of tension. As the children talked about their day, Samuel asked a few casual questions but stayed quiet. Lost in her own thoughts, Anne wondered if she should try to start a deeper conversation with Samuel, but the words felt stuck in her throat. Then, something unexpected happened. Samuel slowly picked up his napkin, wiped his mouth and, without warning, looked directly at Anne. There was something in his gaze, a blend of tenderness and resolve, that she hadn't seen in a long time. You know, he spoke quietly but with conviction, his voice carrying a weight that surprised and, everyone at work envies me, and blinked, taken aback by the sudden remark. The children, too, paused in their chatter, now focused on their father with curiosity. Samuel continued, but it's not because of my job, my car, or my motorcycle. They envy me because I have you waiting for me at home. Anne's heart fluttered unexpectedly. She opened her mouth to respond, but Samuel gently raised his hand, signaling for her to let him finish. When you're not here, the house feels lifeless. You are the heart of this family. You're the anchor that keeps everything in place. What might seem insignificant when you do it is actually the very thing that gives me peace. It's what makes this place truly feel like home. His words hung in the air, heavy with emotion, and felt her eyes well up, her chest tight with a rush of feelings. The children exchanged glances, sensing the gravity of the moment. Dad, Mariana asked softly, her voice full of wonder. Why are you saying this now? Samuel smiled at his daughter before turning his gaze back to Anne. Because sometimes we forget to express the things that matter most, even when they're right in front of us. And today, when you went out, I realized how much I miss you, even when you're only gone for a few hours. Luke, ever the sensitive one, asked cautiously, are you and Mom going to separate? And Samuel shared a laugh, a moment of lightness breaking the tension. No, my love, Anne replied, her voice steady as she found her words again. After dinner, Anne and Samuel put the children to bed together, a rare shared moment they hadn't experienced in a while. They exchanged stories, laughed at Luke's silly jokes, and answered Mariana's endless questions about how they met. When the children's door finally closed, Anne and Samuel lingered in the hallway, locking eyes for a quiet moment. Samuel stepped forward, pulling Anne into a deep embrace, one full of meaning, full of strength. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "I'm sorry for being distant. Life, responsibilities, all of it. It suffocated the small gestures of affection. But I need you to know, I still love you. Actually, I think I love you even more than I did in the beginning." Tears slid down his cheeks, but they were tears of relief and joy. She pulled back slightly, meeting his gaze. "I'm sorry too," she admitted. "I should have told you how I was feeling. I thought maybe you didn't notice me anymore, that you regretted marrying me." Samuel shook his head, his eyes firm with conviction. "Never," he said, his voice resolute. "Marrying you is the best decision I've ever made, and I promise I'll make sure to show you that every day." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms for several minutes, and feeling the familiar warmth of Samuel's body, hearing the steady rhythm of his heart. And in that moment, she realized that the love she feared had faded was, in fact, always there. It had been hiding in the small acts of everyday life, the care for their children, the security of the home they had built together. That night, as they lay in bed, they talked for hours, rediscovering a closeness that had been missing for too long. They spoke of their dreams, their fears, and how they wanted to reconnect. They made plans to have regular date nights, just the two of them, like they did when they were first dating. When they finally drifted off to sleep, it was nearly morning, and felt a peace that had eluded her for so long. She understood now that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers in routine, in the small acts of care and attention that build over time. In the weeks that followed, and noticed subtle changes. Samuel began waking up earlier to have breakfast with the family. He started calling her during the day just to check in. Dinner conversations became livelier, with everyone sharing stories about their day. A month later, on a Friday night after the children were tucked into bed, Samuel surprised and with an impromptu picnic under the stars in their backyard. They reminisced about old times, laughed at past stories, and made new plans for the future, and realized that love, like life, has its ups and downs. There are moments of intense passion, times of calm companionship, and periods of doubt and struggle. But the key is to keep communication open, to always express how you feel, and to never stop appreciating your partner and the journey you share together. As she lay next to Samuel under the starry sky and felt a deep sense of gratitude for the love they had built, for the family they had formed, and for the chance to rediscover each other every day. And in that moment, they reaffirmed their love, not through grand gestures or extravagant declarations, but through the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be, together, ready to face the future, whatever it may bring, with renewed strength and devotion.